Hello, fabulous listeners. Thanks for tuning in to Old Bodies Outside. This is your host, Brian Peterson. This episode's guest is Brian Passenti, who has been involved with endurance sports for nearly 4 decades. He has experienced a variety of endurance challenges, including Ironman triathlons and ultramarathons up to 240 plus miles. He coaches a variety of athletes through his business, Altitude Endurance Coaching. Brian, it's a pleasure to have you on Old Bodies Outside.
Thanks so much, Brian. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So I thought, we could get this conversation started. I wanted to hear about how we connected to have this episode happen.
So somehow we connected on social media. I'm not sure if it was the podcast or your own social media page, but somehow we crossed likes or thumbs up or whatever the social media icons are. And I saw that you had a podcast, and I was like, hey, maybe you're having issues trying to find guests, and no one's really asking me to be on a podcast. So I just reached out and said, hey, you're looking for podcast guests, and it sounds like it works out for both of us, right?
Yeah. So we must be running around in some similar circles. And I got to say, it really a big thank you. It's an honor that you reached out to me. I always love talking to coaches and hearing about how they're trying to help athletes achieve their goals and whatnot. So I really appreciate that. That's really kind of you.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah. So where are you connecting in from?
I live in Glenwood Springs, Colorado. I've been in Glenwood Springs for the last 25 years. I've lived in this town, and I love it. Probably not going to leave anytime soon.
Yeah, well, looking at your pictures, it seems like where you go running, the trails you run on just look fantastic. And the track, I think I saw something of a track where the mountains just shoot straight up right behind it. And I was like, oh my gosh, it looks like a beautiful location.
It is. Glenwood is on the western side of the state. It's between Vail and Aspen, and it's a smaller community that most people haven't heard of. It's a bedroom community. We kind of service those two towns or those two valleys. But I'm fortunate enough to live here and enjoy it. So
yeah. What elevation do you live at?
I live at 7,000 feet on the dot.
Nice.
I do. My house is Glenwood is at 57 or 5,600, so I live a little bit outside of town. But yeah, I based my business name off of it, Altitude Endurance Coaching, because I live at 7,000 feet. So it helps in those big mountain objectives to live at 7,000 feet, and it's not that much farther to 14 grand. So
yeah. Gosh, I'm feeling a little envious with tuning in from Kansas and not having nearly as many trails as you or the altitude. I probably live at like 1,000 feet or so. And so my and I love doing mountainous ultra marathons. And so it has an extra level of challenge associated with training here in Kansas. But I definitely, when I train for races, I make my time out to Colorado, hopefully for at least a couple weekends to try to get up to some altitude, go up to some 14ers or something. And so this upcoming in September, I'm running the Run Rabbit Run Ultramarathon, 100-mile ultramarathon. And
I've heard of that.
Yeah. Aren't you signed up for it? You're registered for it, right?
I am registered for it. Yes, correct.
Yeah. So to prepare for that race, I'm going to go out to Buena Vista for Labor Day weekend and do a long weekend of training. That'll be about 2 weeks out before the race. And so I think that will really benefit me a lot for prepping for making it through the mountains.
The Sawatch Range right there, right next to BV, is just amazing. It's probably my favorite 14er playground. I might be up there, maybe not that weekend, but I'll be up there. I need to finish a couple different objectives up there. I have Princeton to Oxford to do in the Nolan's line.
Wow.
As a scouting, finish up my scouting for the Nolan's line. So it's just Nolan's 14. Are you familiar with that one?
I am. Yeah. My gosh, now I got my head spinning. Are you looking to go after that?
Oh, I mean, I'm looking to, I don't know if that sounds aggressive, like go after it. I mean, I'm looking to experience it. I'm looking to experience it, but I don't know if it'll be within 60 hours, and I'm not sure if it's every year the racing calendar fills up pretty quickly. And so I'm not sure. I haven't penciled it into a year yet. And I'm not getting any younger. So
yeah, well, who cares about the 60 hours, right? I think it's just fun to get out there and navigate it and get to be out in nature for a long period of time. Like that's what it's about.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Okay, so hey, speaking of races, I mentioned Run Rabbit Run, and it sounds like you've heard of that race. I know that you're registered for it as I prepared for this podcast. I wanted to hear what other races you have coming up for summer or for 2023.
I have 4 big events, big objectives this summer coming up. It's a little bit of where I've dubbed it a redemption year. And I'll explain as I go through each one. So the first one will be Bighorn 100, and that's in June, mid-June. I think it's June 17th. It's Father's Day weekend. I'm not set on the exact date, but I want to say it's June 17th. It's in Wyoming, and I think you did it in 21. You just mentioned that, right?
Yes, I did in 2021. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I DNF'd that at I want to say 33 or 35, just before Jaws, that really brutal climb up to the turnaround.
Mm-hmm.
I DNF'd right there, and I want to say it was 13 or 14, 2013 or 2014.
Okay.
And so that's kind of been like, the mud was pretty bad. Cow camp. I was just in a funky, weird spot. I was not being safe. I tripped over a rock. I tripped over like the littlest, tiniest rock with an avocado in my hand, and I landed in this like moon dirt, this just really fine, sooty, like flour type of dirt. And the avocado like exploded on me, and then the dirt stuck to me on top of that. And that was at like mile 20, and that was pretty much like telling of the rest of the afternoon. So I DNF'd at 33 or 35, whatever that aid station was. You might recall it was more recent for you than it was for me.
Yeah, I don't know the name of the aid station, but I know which one you're talking about. That is before Jaws. And the reason I asked about the mud was I actually got really lucky on Bighorn summer of 2021. There was no mud. It was a light winter, but I got to guess that probably the way that this winter has gone in the Rocky Mountain region, that you're probably going to have another muddy race.
It could be icy.
Yeah.
at the rate that we're going right now. I'm in a snowstorm right at this very minute.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't see the edge of the backyard right now. So it's it's crazy. We're having a great winter. It's great for the environment. It's not great for trail running, but it's great for everything else.
Yeah. Well, it's all right. So that's the first piece of redemption right there. Getting after Bighorn.
Bighorn June is redemption. And then in July, I'm going to Ouray 100.
Oh, wow.
And that's huge. That has like 43,000 vertical, I want to say. And I signed up for that in 21 while you were at Bighorn. I signed up for it in 21, but I was dealing with some plantar that season. And about 6 weeks before the actual event, I backed down to the 50 miler. I completed the 50 miler, and it was 23,000 vertical and 50 miles. And it took me 19 hours. So that kind of just puts it into perspective that, it runs like 100 milers, the 50.
Right. Bighorn has about equivalent of that much gain over 100 miles for the 50 miler of that version. So that's a huge race. I've never done a race with that much vert.
And so a little bit of redemption. I want to go back and do the 100, which I initially signed up for in 2021, but I was dealing with plantar. So I'm trying to go back and redeem myself there as well. In August, be back at Leadville for the Leadville 100. It will be my 10th start at Leadville. I have 7 finishes. I have 7 finishes and 2 DNFs at Leadville already.
Okay. Wow.
And so I'm going for my 8th finish and starting my 10th start. And that's not a redemption. That's just the process of wanting to do the 1,000-mile buckle. It's like a turkey platter. It's like bigger than my hips, I think, the belt buckle. And it has your first name on it. It says Brian across the bottom.
Oh my gosh. Well, what's wild is the buckle already if you finish once at Leadville, the buckle's already the size of a platter. So I can't imagine what the 10 finishes one is like.
Yeah, it's the whole turkey. Like
Yeah.
it's the whole turkey. So, in August, back at Leadville for the 100th there, and that's really close. As the crow flies, it's not that far at all from my house. Really close. I'm off the backside of like Turquoise Lake. Um,
Okay.
if you were to shoot an arrow at Leadville, but driving around, it takes me about an hour and 20 minutes
You
to
probably
get
got
to
to go up
Leadville.
to 70 and then cut south. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Yeah, I got to go out to 70 east and then south. Yeah.
Yep, yep,
Um,
that makes sense. And
yeah.
so when we were first met, but before we were recording, you told me a really great story that I immediately loved about Leadville
Mm.
and just the way that they celebrate every runner. I was wondering if you could just share that story now that we're recording.
So Leadville, we were talking about finishing in that last hour, that uh, the final hour of the cutoff for whatever race you're doing, and you had mentioned about uh, Bighorn, the last hour there. But at Leadville, it's referred to as the golden hour, and everybody comes out. Like the sidewalks are packed on Sixth Street for what seems like a half a mile to the bottom of the hill, and there's just crews and families and just supporters, race fans. Everybody's out there on the street. Most of the time, the top finishers are out there as well, and they're cheering on these last hour finishers in that golden hour. Leadville's a 30-hour finish, so it's 29 hours to 30 to the 30-hour mark. In
Wow,
my
wow,
7
that's
finishes, I've been in that golden hour 3 times.
no way. That's gonna be
Yeah,
nerve wracking.
yeah, it is a little nerve wracking. I'm leaning towards the front end of the
Okay,
29. I've done like 29:17, 29:14, and 29:05. So
okay.
I still have a little padding in there, but it's getting a little tighter every year. So in any case, in
I
any case,
think you just.
I've
I was just
experienced the
say.
golden hour. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you just like having all those people lining the finishing chute, and you're like, okay, I'm just gonna wait till 29:03, 29:05, and come right
Yeah.
through.
In previous experiences, I finished in under 24 hours, 4 o'clock in
Nice.
the morning, and it's great. I mean, it's rewarding. I get a ton of sleep. I can eat breakfast, have coffee, show up back up for the golden hour, and see the finishers. Um, but as much as I remember that finish, those golden hour finishes are pretty special. I mean, that crowd really gets you worked up. You're just choked up. My wife and I are holding hands. My kids are on my side. My crew's walking behind me. I mean, it's a pretty powerful moment in that last hour. It's a pretty powerful moment for anybody to finish any 100. But that golden hour where everyone's just cheering you on and they're just raging for you, to get in. And you could see the runners coming in from about what seems like about a half a mile away. And, your eyes on the clock and your eyes on that runner, and you're hoping that there's enough time and they can cover the real estate to get to the finish line in time. And sometimes when there's 3, 4, 5, 6 minutes left, they're not going to make it. And it's just like, you just get choked up, you get welled up, and it's even hard to make eye contact with them. You cheer for them, and you're, proud of them for getting in there and getting it done in 30 hours and 10 minutes or whatever it might be. But it is so hard, and, they're deflated, or, sometimes they're elated that, they just got it done. But most of the
Right.
time they didn't earn the buckle. They get the finisher medal, but they don't get the buckle,
Okay.
which is obviously the real glory in all of this.
Yeah. Well, piece of hardware. Yeah. No, but I love that the community's out celebrating those athletes that are on the course for the longest, and that's something that as I was mentioning before we started recording, the last ultramarathon I did was Bighorn in 2021. And I returned to watch the last hour of runners finish, and it was powerful. And I was blown away and inspired by how long those athletes were on the course. I felt like my accomplishment paled in comparison because they were on the course for longer. I had gone back to my hotel, I'd taken a shower, I'd taken a nap, and we got food. And then I come back, and they're still going on the course. They've gone through a second hot afternoon, and I'm like, these athletes are amazing. So I'm glad to see that Leadville celebrating them because they deserve it.
Yeah. They really get their money's worth, those athletes.
Yeah, they certainly do. They certainly do, and they deserve it though. They are really hardcore.
And then
Well,
the last on my calendar will be Steamboat, Run Rabbit Run, and I'll see you there in
yeah,
September. So I got 4 100s. In Steamboat, I DNF'd. I thought it was longer ago or farther back, but I guess I DNF'd it in 2017. I saw it come up in a memory on like a social media memory of Facebook or something just recently, and I was like, oh, that was only 2017 or so. So it was sooner than I had thought. But I DNF'd that one pretty early as well. I want to say at 44 or so, um,
Okay.
and that was just all in my mind. My heart wasn't in it. I had a sharp pain in my knee. Um, I didn't feel that great relative to running 40 plus miles already. It was a rough season, and I called it and just decided I was going to go to town and go get burgers and beers for the crew.
Hmm.
And and I, my wife's like, "Are you sure? You sure?" She tried to talk me out of it. And I was like, we're just done. Let's just finish this up and get out of here. So we left. We went to a restaurant and got burgers. And we're leaving the restaurant, and she's like, I'm joking with my buddy or my crew guy, and we're walking to the car, and she's like, "Hey, you lost your limp. You don't have a limp anymore." And so it was all in my head. I mean, hindsight's always 2020, right?
Yeah.
But it was all
Yeah.
in my head. I mean, it was probably a bad pain, but I was focusing on it. I was drawing attention to it, and I was really just kind of like digging in that this was the issue. This is going to keep me from finishing, as opposed to trying to get through the process and finishing Run Rabbit Run that year. So this year I'll be back for a redemption. So 3 redemption races in Leadville, 4 100 milers. They're all about 5 weeks apart from each other, so it should
Okay.
be pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've the most the most 100-mile ultra marathons I've tried to take on in a single year is 2. And so you got a good challenge with you. But I've heard that, and I don't know if you've heard differently. This is honestly a question, but and this is also going to help my preparation for Run Rabbit Run. But I've heard the Run Rabbit Run course is comparable to the Bighorn course.
Um, I bet it is. I don't know enough about the Bighorn course. I only ran 35 miles of it, or 32 miles of it, or whatever it is. I didn't do the backside of Jaws or whatever that bigger climb that everyone talks about and boasts up. Um, so I don't have experience with that. It I mean, it just goes up and down, up and down, up and down, like any
Yeah.
Colorado mountain course does. It has a varied amount of terrain. You'd be up way up high in the pines on one side of town, and you come through town and you cross to the other side, and it's really kind of like sagebrushy and almost sandy of sorts, or like
Okay.
it's just kind of a different high mountain feel than the other side of town when you're high up in the pines. So you kind of experience like it all at Steamboat. I feel like it's you get a lot of terrain experiences out there.
Yeah, well, that sounds great just to keep things kind of mentally engaged as the race progresses. And one of the things that I really struggle with a lot with ultramarathons is living in Kansas, I don't get downhill training in.
Mm.
And so Bighorn has a lot of downhill from about maybe mile 82 to the finish.
Mhm.
And gosh, and that's, late in the race, your quads are shot. I really struggled with that part of Bighorn just because of I lack downhill training. But I think that people that have good downhill training should be able to finish pretty strongly at Bighorn.
That's good advice. Thanks.
So now that we've talked about our races and whatnot, I want to hear about your coaching services and what types of athletes do you work with, and where can listeners find more information if they are interested in your coaching services?
I coach. I own a business called Altitude Endurance Coaching. I started it in 2018 on advice from my wife. I was coaching a handful of local athletes for different events, and she said, you should probably, charge some money for this and kind of start the side hustle and see how it goes. And it really was a side hustle. I had a full-time job. I worked for town government at the time, in recreation, and it's kind of grown and expanded and grown and expanded and ebbed and flowed. And then just recently in January, pretty much all of this year so far, 2023, I've gone full-time coaching. So this side gig, this side hobby has come like complete fruition and is like, paying the bills, and I'm making money, and I got all the apps and the tools and all the processes in there. I train him mostly on Training Peaks platform. It's a coaching app for athletes. It's like your Strava, but maybe on steroids is how I usually try to describe Training Peaks.
Okay.
Just gives a
Yeah, I'm
lot
not familiar
more.
with it.
Yeah, it gives a lot more metrics as far as like just way more in depth than a Strava. Most people are familiar with Strava.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but this is way more in depth than Strava. Just Strava on steroids. And I coach all sorts of athletes. I coach obviously ultra athletes. I coach marathoners, road runners. I also coach tactical athletes for like military special forces or just military enlistment. Both sides of that house.
Nice, nice. Well, that sounds super fantastic. And being a coach, there's so much to it. I think people just think that it's training plans and whatnot, but there's also the mental component and balancing training with the life obligations that are going on. And so, how do you go about like kind of doing a holistic approach and being able to fit those training programs into people's busy lives?
That's a great question, and I live it, and I think that helps. I have two daughters of my own, middle schooler, elementary schooler. My wife works full time at the hospital here locally, and I've just recently just started working from home. But I had a full time in person job outside of the house prior to that, and so I get the struggles, and so coaching athletes that I understand that we all have. We're not professional athletes. I don't have any professional athletes on my roster. We're not making money at this. We're just doing it as a hobby for fun to keep ourselves happy, healthy, and find enjoyment in being outside and moving. And so I try to encourage that at a minimum. And I think there's just a real component to be as a coach to being compassionate. I think athletes start to figure me out as we start to work together, as well as I figure them out. But there's a lot of, it's a relationship. I'm Zooming with them probably, once to twice a month. We're talking through emails, through text messages, all sorts of platforms and formats. They're asking questions about the workout. I'm trying to give them the parameters. The car needs to get the oil changed in it. And so I'm like, hey, drive to the oil place and go run for 45 minutes while they're changing your oil, like just trying to give that advice of like how to squeeze it in there, how to squeeze every ounce out of the training process and find those little gaps instead of just sitting there and playing on your phone at the oil changing facility. Get out there and do the little run at that time or wake up a little bit earlier, or if you can't get it in, it's okay. Again, we're not professional athletes, and we'll get after it tomorrow. It's not the end of the world. Again, it's got to be fun and engaging, and I think that's kind of where I come from in that regard.
Yeah, yeah, no, I love that. And the two parts that you addressed there, one is, fitting it in with a busy lifestyle is something that I think a lot of listeners relate to. And that's, how it goes when you got especially if you have a family, you're trying to squeeze in when you can. Sometimes it's early morning or a lunch break or something like that. But then also like, yeah, you're trying to make that training program work, but this is play. Like running is play. And so I think that component should never be forgot about. Like we're out there having fun. We're out there, getting all the benefits of doing a trail race. And for me, doing an ultra marathon is some of my proudest moments. There's definitely moments in my life that I'm more proud of, but every time I've finished across the finish line, it's like a self pat on the back, and life kind of feels a little more rosy again. And it has a wonderful effect on me psychologically.
Definitely. Yeah. And I see it in myself. And from the coaching perspective, I'm like rooting for you as my athlete. I'm rooting for everybody, but I'm rooting for you as my athlete. And so I get that joy from when I'm watching your race. If it's got the tracker, I'm watching your race on the weekends. My kids are like, what are you doing on your phone, Dad? And I'm like, oh, I'm tracking two athletes, and there are two different races in two different parts of the country. And I'm like, I'm checking in on them to see how they're doing, and I'm excited for them. And, to see them through the process is a great experience from the coach point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's awesome that and thanks to modern technology too, you're able to, coach people that live in a variety of places. You're able to track them if you're not able to make the race and whatnot. And so that sounds just so much fun. And I also want to hear about, you do some high school coaching too?
I do. So I just recently got back into coaching high school. I'm coaching high school track currently. We're in the middle of the season right now. We'll see how today's goes. It's probably dumped like 4 inches at my house since
Wow.
this morning. Um, and we did shovel the track earlier in the season to try to run some laps on it um, in March. So, and I have a previous experience of coaching high school track or cross country specifically, and that was before I had kids. I kind of took a hiatus for the last 10 years or so, but I coached cross country for 4 seasons, high school cross country. Again, in the same town that I live in, Glenwood Springs, and it was really rewarding. I mean, all of it's rewarding, but I enjoyed the 4 year process because I saw a class come in and saw them all the way to graduation. So I kind
Right.
of connected with a group that worked their way through the high school process. Um, and now I'm coaching distance with track and helping out. I'm learning a lot about things I've never known before about like what did I just coach this past weekend was the pole vault. I have no idea anything about the pole vault.
Whoa. Yeah.
I was being like a parent supporter more than anything. I was just like,
Yeah.
yeah, you guys are doing great, but I was there for them to support them, but I don't know anything about the pole vault enough to give advice on how to get over the stick. Like I don't know how to do that. So
Yeah, and pole vault, man, it's gosh a lot of technique. I think people like there's the guts factor. You're gonna fling yourself super high in the air, but there's also the technique factor. And I ran track in high school, but A, I never had the guts to do the pole vault, and B, like I was too focused on running my distance races to ever get coaching on the technique aspect of it.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I long jumped and it was a really weak attempt at long jumping. But I
Yeah.
ran distance. Yeah. I was the distance kid. So
Yeah, you got me thinking about coaching though. That sounds so fantastic to be able to work with, freshmen, seeing through the 4 year process. And there's so much development in those 4 years. I mean, it's really informative years, a
mhm.
lot of development, a lot of education to be had too, and a lot of great connections. And what a wonderful thing. Like that got, I would love to get involved with high school coaching. That just sounds really gratifying.
Yeah. And I just recently took the USATF certification course for level 1 coaching. So it's USA track and field. I just thought I know a lot about distance, or I think I do, but maybe there's a different, maybe there's something I could learn or something I missed in distance. But also I learned about the pole vault and the shot put and the discus and the hammer throw. I was like, we're still doing the hammer throw. I didn't even know that was a thing still. Like I thought that was like medieval times or something. I mean, I guess I seen it in the Olympics at that level, but I didn't know we were doing it. Like we're not doing it locally, but it's in the curriculum, and so I learned a lot about it. So it was cool. It's different.
Yeah,
It's kind
I
of
feel like there's always something to learn about running, and with taking that certification, that's another some more stuff that you learn. The learning process never ends. And so, what did that level 1 mean? What does that mean?
it was kind of like the base level. I mean, obviously level 1's base level. I could go on a 2 and do more of a specific, which I probably will for cross country and distance or endurance is really what they call it. Um, and so I'll probably do those more specific courses related to what I'm coaching. But level 1 was pretty much a good overview of all the disciplines in track and field that are offered at all levels as well. So this summer I'll be coaching my daughters, both of my daughters, 8th grade and below, like a juniors track program in the summer. So 6 weeks
Nice.
in the summer, we'll go to the track Monday through Thursday, 9 to 11 a.m. And we'll just get them running laps. They'll get into some starting blocks, figure it out if they like the long jump or if they like to throw the shot put, and just kind of get a feel for it. And it's been in this community for about 45 years or so. And it's a great feeder program for the high school and junior high levels. So these kids potentially get an understanding of what they want to do by the time they get to high school, as far as like track and field goes. So they have an understanding. So they're not so lost. I mean, we get some kids that come in and try everything and then figure out their way. But if we could start that process in elementary and middle school levels, then we've done half the work by the time they get to high school. Okay, like you want to be the distance kid, you want to run, you figured out got some momentum with it, and so let's go with it, and so we kind of figured that out in the process of doing this junior program, so it's great.
Yeah, no, it sounds like a wonderful theater program, and I think your job just sounds amazing. To go hang out with your kids this summer, run some track with them, go be healthy together. But I was thinking, as you were talking about coaching more and more, and I was thinking back to my experiences when I ran in high school, and it never dawned on me until you talked about the level 1 certification. My high school coach coached everything. I mean, he had a background in the 800 meters, but he's sitting here
Mm-hmm.
coaching sprints. He's coaching long distances. He's coaching, long jump, high jump, pole vault, everything. And so it never dawned on me that he probably didn't know how to do every event. He didn't compete in every event, but he had to
Mm-hmm.
learn it to be able to teach it to the high school students. And I think that's something that I just never realized until you started talking about your level 1 certification.
Yeah, yeah, it's great. It was a good course, and I enjoyed it. It was, like most things, it was on Zoom, but it was like, I wouldn't say it was crammed, but it was like a whole weekend. It was like all night Friday, all day Saturday, like 10 hours, and all day Sunday for like 10 hours. So it was a bit much to be on Zoom that much. Um,
Wow.
but they kept my attention because the things the events I didn't know about were on Sunday. So I was really kind of focused on Sunday. I was learning about the javelin and the discus. And, I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Like I never knew how to throw a javelin. I mean, I just figured you
Either. Yeah.
threw it like a stick or something, like, and, but there's a huge technique to it apparently. And I learned a lot
Yeah.
about it. So it was good.
Gosh, this is so fantastic to hear about all these different. I mean, we're hitting the top of the iceberg here, but there's so many different ways to learn about running, track and field, cross country, so many different facets to it. And it's really inspiring to hear all this. I never thought about these aspects, as I mentioned before, reflecting back on my high school coach.
You talked about it in the bio, but you mentioned that I've been in the endurance sports world for 40 years or so, and I got my start at middle school. I ran the mile and the 2 mile, and I ran the 5K for cross country. And so that's the other reason, the other basis for coaching. Of course, I have my own kids in the program and all those things, but it's really where I found my roots. I'm still running 40 plus years later from those experiences. So I want to share that with people, whether it's on this
Yeah.
platform, online, or even at just the local middle school level, and contribute to the community here locally as well as globally on my website and my platform.
Yeah, Brian, I think that's a really wonderful point to make is when you have a good leader who's shown you these healthy life habits. It's something that can be carried on through the rest of your life, just like both you and I do as adults. We still run and whatnot, and that's largely a product as I had, a really caring, fun coach. He brought a lot of love and kindness to every athlete and supported them kind of uniquely to match their personality. And I think that just happy time during those formative years, has kept me inspired to keep running foundational in my life.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to hear about how, I just mentioned running being foundational in my life, and it's something that I've turned to when there's been challenging times. It's something that I turn to if, say, sometimes like I'll get like an email that I'm not sure how I want to respond to. I might save it till post run, and maybe think about during running. If I'm feeling tense about something, I might go for a run to be in a better mode to make rational decisions versus just quick emotional decisions. And so I want to hear how running's been foundational throughout your life.
I mean, just like you, Brian, the same things. I have been a lifelong runner, and I want to be a lifelong runner. I want to be running until, even farther than when the doctor says I shouldn't be running. I still want to be running.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the main goal. I have these events this year, and I have some ideas for next year. But in general, I want to be a lifelong runner, and I want to share that with everyone I can. Running is such a part of my life. It's probably like the most stable building block that I have in my life. It's been in my life, longer than my wife and my kids. I ran the day that one of my best friends died. I ran on my wedding day. I ran on the day my first marriage, my divorce went through. I just know I ran on all those days. I know I did. I mean, I remember most of them, but I know I did. And the same thing, if I'm feeling frustrated, I need to go for a run. If I'm about to, fire off a not so nice email, I probably need to go for a run and kind of just wait it out for a minute, think through the process, and even other things like business strategy or just coaching in general. Like, how can I connect with this athlete better? Let me go for a run and think about it, And so running and or exercise, because I do have a snowstorm here, and so some days I bike if I need to, but otherwise I'm running. And trying to figure those things out. So it's been instrumental in all the things that I do in my life, and it's been this long-standing go-to. It's just a foundational building block of everything I have.
Yeah, Brian, gosh, we have a lot in common. I also went running the morning of my wedding. And I got married this past August, actually. I got married this past
Oh, congrats!
August. Thank you, appreciate it. And we got married outside of Silverton. And we
Oh,
got married. If I don't know if you're familiar with the Hard Rock course at all.
a little bit.
Little bit.
I'm
I
just
don't know if you're
teasing.
saying that sarcastically.
It is total sarcastic.
Okay. So in Silverton, if you were to head deeper into the canyon, it turns into a dirt road, and there's a campground called the Eureka Campground. They also have a
Mhm.
lodge there. And the lodge was an old miners' hotel, and they restored it. And we ended up getting married there, and it was just a fantastic, fantastic location. The mountains kind of come down like that, and we're framed by the mountains. Got married right here. So we actually did two things. So we did that on a Saturday, and we did that with our family and our close friends, and did a celebration socially. But we also want to do a celebration privately. And so what we did for that was we got up the Thursday before. So we got married on a Saturday. The Thursday before, we got up about 4 a.m. and we hiked up together to Island Lake and did a private
Oh
exchange
yeah,
of vows. Yeah. So I got kind of married in two
awesome,
places. Yeah. So,
nice.
and I'm really
When
excited. Go for it.
you go, you're
This
excited.
summer, I got invited, and it's just so cool to help one of my buddies finish up Hard Rock last 18 miles, and it's such a cool thing when someone approaches you and asks you to pace them and crew them at a race. It's such an honor, and for that part, we're going to be going by Island Lake, and
I
so
didn't
I'll be.
know if it was which direction. It depends
Yep.
on which direction. I didn't know. And so where I was going to say, where I was almost going to cut you off, is I picked up, I course swept the flagging for the last 18 miles from Telluride to Silverton, and came over the top and looked down into Island Lake. And I don't know what year that was. I want to say um, it was a long time ago. It was probably 13 or 12 or 13, 2012 or
Okay.
2013. And one of the years, the year prior, I was second on the wait list for Hard Rock. I've never run Hard Rock, but I got to second on the wait list at the starting line. I did not show up, but I did not get picked either. So it was a good
Wow,
decision not
being
to show up.
second.
So
Yeah. So Brian,
yeah.
I'm like 25th to 30th on the wait list this summer, and it's not even a consideration in my head. I'm happy that I'm that deep on the wait list versus being like on the cusp. I'd be like, should I
Yeah.
train? Should I not? Because Hard Rock's just I've been trying to get into Hard Rock since 2013 or 2014,
Hmm.
and it's something that. But my tickets are accumulating, and hopefully next summer I get pulled. But anyways, going back to Island Lake, my as I'm going to be pacing my buddy towards the finish line, my wife and my son are going to be waiting at Island Lake and cheer for us there, and I'll
Awesome.
be able to give her a quick kiss and a hug, and enjoy a quick moment together where we exchanged our private
It
vows.
it might be a couple minutes if your buddy's at mile
Yeah,
78 or whatever that might be.
yeah, it'll be a couple minutes for sure. I think they're gonna just hike up from the trailhead,
Yeah.
and hang out there and enjoy the just stunning scenery that's there.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so
That's awesome.
Brian, before we finish up our recording today, because I know you got to head out to track practice, I wanted to hear about what do you have to say to athletes who are considering entering into endurance events, and they might be someone that is like, hey, like I'm thinking about this, but it just looks so intimidating, it looks scary. Like, what would you say to those types of athletes?
I usually maybe have a softer approach, but I think for a lieu of this conversation, I mean, like, I'm going to encourage you to do it. Get out there, put yourself out there, make yourself vulnerable, challenge yourself. I mean, all those things come to mind. Um, you're, there'll come a day where you'll regret that you didn't do it, and you won't be able to do it then, later on in life. And so I think in both good and bad experiences, I've led a life of just doing things, and then and with great outcomes at the, inevitably at the end, great outcomes. But I would say, there's so much research out there. Again, to go back to technology, I mean, like, sign up for the event first off, get your name in the hat, get that dangly carrot out there, so you have something to shoot for, a trajectory, and then start to figure out the processes of getting there, right? So what seems like an insurmountable amount of training and or the event itself. A friend of mine, um, Gemini Reed from Gemini Adventures, he's the race director. He talks about eating an elephant, and and he stumped me. I don't know why. I was not thinking outside of the box, and he was like, "How do you eat an elephant?" And I just got stumped. I was like, I'm like, I don't know. I've never had elephant. I'm not really sure. But he's like, you eat it one bite at a time, and so that's the analogy I use after he told me that. Quite often I use that analogy, that you got to take small chunks of it and just chop at it in little bits, put it in bite-sized pieces to eat this elephant, to get to that starting line with the training that you need to get there. Of course, I'm a coach, so I'd love for you to hire a coach for the process. But there's also like training plans online. There's books and YouTube videos on how to coach yourself, and all those things as well. So whatever means you need to get there, get yourself to the starting line healthy and fit, and then think of the event in the same manner as well. Aid station to aid station, maybe mile to mile. I mean, it might be just a moment to moment. It's really, if you break it into these micro manageable sections, it seems way less daunting than the whole big picture at one big challenge. It just seems like you can get there a little bit easier by taking these steps to get yourself there.
Yeah, and I think that wonderfully explains the metaphor of how do you eat an elephant. Bite-sized chunks, digest them one at a time, and like you said, whether it's mile by mile or aid station by aid station, whatever your digestible chunk is, that's the approach. I mean, I gotta say, when I've completed not nearly as many 100-mile races as you. I've completed 6, but at the start line of each of those, you would think that I've gained some confidence, and maybe I have, maybe I haven't, but I'm always nervous, I'm always anxious at the start line, and I have to repeat that stuff to myself. I have to say, hey, look, don't focus on the that you're doing 100 miles today. Focus on getting to the first aid station. Take it with that, and then go to the next aid station, and then go to the next aid station.
When I was coaching cross country back in the day, we'd get to these bigger meets, these regional meets, these big invitationals, or even state, for the handful of kids that made it to state from our school. And you could see it when the bus would stop. The blood would just flush out of their face, and they'd just kind of look like, whoa, this is going to be, this is a bit much. You could just tell they were nervous energy and all this stuff. And I always try to just tell them, and my athletes, the same thing. You mentioned that you get to a starting line and you're nervous still after 600s, having completed 600 milers, is that everyone else on that line is equally as nervous. And so it's not just you, like if you're like, oh, like everyone's feeling this nervous energy, like it's just buzzing around, like, because you just internalize it as just being yourself. But really everyone on that line is nervous. They're all kicking their feet and doing the weird thing or that weird stretch they're doing just to kind of, pretend like they're not nervous, but everyone's just as nervous on the line. And if you're not nervous, there's probably a reason, and I don't know if it's the best reason. Usually I think of the times I've DNF'd races, and it's probably the times I've not been nervous at the starting line, or just maybe overconfident, or kind of like maybe not into it. But I think a good nervousness is an awesome start to a race. I mean, I think of respecting the distance of whatever distance you're doing, whether it's the 5K or the 100-miler, having that good, nervous energy about the distance itself that you're trying to cover, or your goals, whether it's the 5K and you're trying to, break 18 minutes or whatever it might be.
Yeah,
I
no,
think those are great ways to get to the starting line.
yeah, I agree about that, and I think that nervousness is reflective of a level of, like, there's respect for the course, respect that's what's going to be happening, and if that respect isn't there, there's the greater possibility of overlooking some of the details that are going to be happening with your body during the race, especially ultramarathons where managing the body is so important to get to the finish line. But if there's a little bit of lack of humility, you might miss some of those details of the physiological aspects of your body and mismanage yourself. And then you might be in a really deep hole that you may not be able to get out of.
Totally.
Yeah. All right, Brian, I think you have about 13 minutes to get to track practice or so.
Yeah, I'll get there. It'll be fine.
Okay. Well, this has been a wonderful conversation. I wanted to connect back to the start of the episode and just say thanks again for reaching out to Old Bodies Outside. I'm glad that we kind of fell in the same social media circles, and I see why we did. And I just want to say thanks again for reaching out to be on Old Bodies Outside. It's really just awesome to have you on here. I love hearing about coaches and their approaches to athletes. And furthermore, it's great to make another friend in the ultra running community. And I look forward to meeting you in person at Run Rabbit Run. And in the meantime, good luck with your Summer of Redemption.
Summer of Redemption. I appreciate it, Brian. Thanks for your time.
Okay, I'm going to throw on that outro music and we'll call it an episode.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.